So let's focus on Ukraine right now. And we don't want to say that we told you so. I mean, we don't want to do that. I don't necessarily like to do that. Actually, that's bullshit. I like to do that. Because what it often does when we tell you we told you so, that means that the mainstream media has been lying to you. So we told you so. A new report out this morning shows that what we long suspected, that Ukrainian government officials, not just like random guys, but keep this up on the screen. These are Ukrainian officials accused of stealing train loads of U.S. aid. Okay? The allegation comes amid mass raids by the SBU, the Security Forces of Ukraine. And get this, an anti-corruption agency in the Zaporizhzhia region. First of all, yes, American taxpayers are footing the bill for billions of dollars in monies going to Ukraine. And what we've long suspected, that they've been stealing U.S. aid, stealing U.S. weapons, stealing U.S. monies. Here's some video of the SBU. These are the security forces, by the way, that did this raid. According to the reports this morning, the Ukrainian Security Service and the Anti-Corruption Agency have been busting down doors and discovering that Ukrainian officials have been stealing American aid. And of course, this should come as no surprise to anyone watching our show, all of you who subscribe to our channel, that we've reported how the Ukrainian government, of course, is the most corrupt government in Europe and one of the most corrupt governments in the world. So would it be a surprise at all that this government would be stealing U.S. aid monies?
No, it wouldn't.
No.
No.
Well, I think we also have to call attention to the credibility of the SBU as well. I mean, it's not like a, very
well, I'm going to get to that
nice
piece of this. So, right, this is the interesting piece of this, right? So the Security Service of Ukraine, the SBU, is doing these raids and finding this corruption. Okay. One of the things I was stunned about in reading this story is that Ukraine even has an anti-corruption agency. Like, what the hell is that about? They have an anti-corruption agency?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Another big piece of the story is that they are not fringe government officials who are stealing these monies from the United States and from citizens who deserve it or need it. No, these are Zelensky government officials. They are part of the Zelensky government. This is no small theft, by the way. According to the report, the Ukrainian officials stole not just a small amount, but listen to this. They stole all of the aid. Like, they didn't even leave a box. They didn't even leave a scrap for their civilians. They stole all of it. ALL. And it was sent to the region near Zaporizhzhia. This aid was meant for civilians in that region. But by the way, this has happened all over the place. This is just one example in Zaporizhzhia.
And this is something that, again, the European Union would not allow Ukraine in until they address their corruption issues, right? So we already knew there was corruption. A lot of it is to do with Ukraine acting as a middleman between Russian gas supply and actual sale to its population, just sort of padding their own pockets as the sale of energy goes back and forth. This has been happening since Ukraine became a state.
Right. And remember Ursula von der Leyen, the EU president, saying, well, we really feel confident that Ukraine, in order to fast track their EU membership, they've really come a long way. I mean, they've really addressed the problems. We feel confident that they're well on the track to becoming an EU member.
Based on what? We're not quite sure.
David, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just curious, like, what is included in this aid? Are we talking like pallets of money like in Afghanistan and Iraq? Are we talking clothes, food? Like, what are we talking? Because surely they're not sending citizens weapons.
So let's go through it. So here's some of the details of it. What they stole, they are reselling through local aid. They are selling through local retail establishments. The total volume that was stolen was 22 massive shipping containers. Okay, 22 massive shipping containers, like the ones that come into ports. They put cars inside of them. 22 of those they stole. An entire train. Yes, an entire train with 389 freight cars they stole. This isn't like some small little job, like little, two angry teenagers got together and decided to do this. This was a coordinated effort. You don't steal a whole train, 389 freight cars of material. They stole basically 389 Thomas the Tank engines filled with clothing. That's basically what they stole. Clothing, food, all kinds of, and then weapons and additional monies as well. They also didn't stop there. They stole 220 trucks filled with United States aid. Think about that. Just in this one example, 389 freight cars filled with stuff to help the people.
You know what really pisses me off about this? Is we're dealing with shortages here. We're dealing with a food shortage, and you're telling me they're sending 22 containers of ship containers. They're sending trains. They're sending all of this food over to Ukraine when there are cities here that need it probably far worse than they do.
Well, a lot of it is coordinated too by private groups. We've seen so much sort of civilian uprising and outreach to donate whatever you can, especially when the war began, there was a big push here in Europe to, what can you give? Baby seats, baby cars, right? Baby car seats.
Cars that babies can drive. Do you have any small vehicles?
It's a luxury war.
Cars that babies can drive?
Diapers, antibiotics, all of that stuff. So some of that was privately organized too from well-intentioned people.
But a lot of it comes from through the USAID, through Red Cross. So we know that a lot of the supplies coming from government-funded American Red Cross and others stolen. So U.S. and organized by those organizations and funded by the federal government of the United States. All of it stolen. All of it. Not just a fraction, all of it. So we're led to believe the SBU, which we talked about earlier, the Security Service of Ukraine, are the good guys now? Like these are the good guys? These are the same guys. We showed you video of them breaking down doors throughout Ukraine, trying to track down dissenting voices, literally breaking into people's houses like you see here and knocking down doors, right? The Associated Press even did a ride along with these guys to show like, hey, we're seeking out people who might have pro-Putin social media posts in there or whatever. So as we've reported on this show, the U.S. State Department has on its very own website the details about the SBU's corruption and human rights abuses. This is the U.S. State Department. You can go, this is 2021, by the way. You can read this right on the U.S. State Department's website. So why is the United States government funneling millions of dollars to a corrupt human rights abusive security service inside of Ukraine anyway? So forgive me if I don't believe they've suddenly changed their stripes here. And now they're looking out for the bad, they're looking out for the little guy. We're going to find corrupt government officials and we're going to root them out as part of our investigation. I don't buy it. This is the same SBU that has killed journalists. They've made people inside Ukraine simply disappear, but now they're looking out for the civilians. Again, I don't buy it at all. So something doesn't smell right here. The SBU is suddenly the Boy Scouts. You'll recall, maybe you don't even know about this stunning report a few years ago, an undercover investigation by Radio Free Europe discovered that these guys in the SBU drive some really fancy cars, some top-of-the-line cars that no one else around them can afford. Lavish lifestyles. How do they afford all of this on a low-paying government salary, they asked. I mean, these are the cars. They had hidden cameras following the SBU around, right? Here they pull into parking lots, and here you are, the Ukrainian security service in Kiev, right? But the drivers are coy, they say in this Radio Free Europe. Watch as this reporter runs up and tries to get answers from these SBU agents. How much does an SBU officer earn these days? How can one afford such an expensive car, she asks. No answers. No answers.
Well, that has been a problem with Ukrainian politicians from the beginning. In fact, Leonid Kravchuk, the first president of Ukraine, he drove a Mercedes, and people used to calculate that on his government salary, he would have to work nonstop 136 years to pay for that Mercedes. And people have always wondered, how can he afford that? Or other, for instance, foreign trade ministers would show off snaps of skiing holidays that he couldn't afford on these, so Ukrainian politicians sort of have always publicly taken one salary and lived an incommensurate life.
Yeah, and Zelensky
it's
too,
like that.
Right?
Well, I don't know what
was
his
that, Wise
salary
Guys
is,
or
but-
whatever? With Joe Piscopo, and I think it was Danny DeVito, where they're buying all that stuff, and they're like, "Thank you, Mr. Acavano."
Yeah.
Remember that?
Well, it's like
It's
like
the
in
United States
Goodfellas.
is giving them that money.
It's like in
Yeah,
Goodfellas.
exactly.
Like it goes right in the truck, and these guys come right in and take it right off, right? And then they enrich
Right.
themselves.
Well, every government takes the opportunity to enrich itself, and so for Ukraine, it's just been an opportunity in between energy companies and energy consumers, right? That's just been an easy, low-hanging fruit.
Well,
but
and it's
now this is just literally like truckloads of stuff that they're like, sure, I'll take that because that's our way.
Yeah. And so this, of course, comes as we just announced. Well, so let's actually, before we get to that, let's look at the Zelensky piece of this, right? So Zelensky, a lot of us have had this question, like, why is President Zelensky so rich? The Panama Papers revealed massive wealth of the Ukrainian regime. And when they showed, like, hey, offshore accounts, offshore real estate, all of these things, how has he made, $596 million? Salary of $780,000. Something doesn't track here. It doesn't really make sense to me. I'm not exactly sure why.
Maybe some of the, Vogue cover modeling is done for pay.
I guess.
I mean, Vogue does pay cover models quite a lot. So
Yeah.
that's a possibility.
Yeah. Okay. So again, this of course comes as we all announced just a massive new tranche of weapons and aid package to Ukraine. So again, here's the Bloomberg piece today. Torrent of cash for Ukraine arms puts Pentagon watchdog on alert. So the Inspector General is going to look for fraud, waste, and replenishment as we send a torrent of new arms to Ukraine. Replenishing billions of dollars in weapons sent to Ukraine, its Inspector General said he's on high alert for signs of fraud and abuse at the Pentagon. Oh, really?
But how can that be when other members of the Pentagon are willingly admitting that they can't track weapons, that they really just have no way? They drop them off at Poland. It's like a school drop off. Bye, guys. Hope you have a good day. Like we've known this for weeks now.
Yeah. The Inspector General's oversights will focus on $26.6 billion in supplemental spending for Ukraine, approved by Congress since last year, which has supported a drawdown of weapons inventories. And then it goes beyond that. So if we think about the CNN study, which found out that what happens to those weapons that go to Ukraine, we don't know. We don't know where they go. We don't know. Remember when we featured that story from CNN, what happens to those weapons? We don't know. They can't track them. They're sent across the border, and according to CNN, a blind spot is there, due in large parts, they say, to the lack of U.S. boots on the ground in the country and the easy portability of many of the smaller systems pouring across the border. It's a conscious risk the Biden administration is willing to take. In the short term, the U.S. sees the transfer of hundreds of millions of dollars worth of equipment to be vital to Ukraine's ability to hold off Moscow's invasion. But we just don't know where they go. It goes into a black hole. We have fidelity for a short time, but when it enters the fog of war, we have almost zero.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not surprising then that there might be some corruption on the receiving end, especially given that story sort of blew me away with the one little piece that said it goes into even civilian cars, right? So there's no official recipient. And when you look at the piece that we showed you just the other day of soldiers in Ukraine that are dying because they can't receive this aid, they say they die on the fields, they can't get to any medics, no medics can get to them. It's 2 kilometers away from anywhere that they could go for help under heavy fire. Like, they really are not getting what they need, no matter how generous the West pretends to be.
Yeah, unbelievable. But I'm glad the SBU is tracking all of this, and they're on top of it, and they're looking out for government corruption inside of the Zelensky regime. Let's see how far they get and how high up the totem pole that actually goes.